Welcome to the show, everybody. Around the nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Woo. Nice and bright. You can actually see that my jacket's blue. I know. All this time, everybody's like, wait, you mean that's not black? No, I can actually turn up the brightness now. Hopefully it's not too bright, though. But hey, anyway, that was weird. Welcome to the show. I always start my show a little strangely, like just going off on random tangents, so you'll get used to that if you're a new viewer. But anyway, hey, we got a great show for you guys today. We're going to talk about, of course, more of Donald Trump's freaking out about impeachment. That's always fun. Then Donald Trump meets with Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. That's an interesting meeting that happened here. We also have Lindsey Graham, the story from yesterday, of course, defending President Trump. Then we have Pete Buttigieg taking some swipes at Bernie Sanders. We're going to talk about that. That's interesting stuff. And then finally, student loans. Basically, how the government is screwing people out of their their tax refunds for student loans. So, okay. So that's a disastrous story. We're going to save that for the end, of course. But regardless, we got a great story for great show for you guys today. A lot of great stories. So please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Definitely appreciate it when you guys do that. Helps the show. Another way to help the show, of course, is patreon.com/TYTNation. You guys know that. I want to thank some patrons now. Colin Barber, Joshua Lighthill, Monty, Chris Robato, and Kim Hightower. I want to thank those patrons for supporting the show. Also, I want to thank people who have signed up as the channel members, and that's what that is. And I want to give a shout out, of course, to that. Let's see. Hold on here. Okay, we've got a couple of new channel members, David Burns and Wildman 2. So I want to thank you guys for signing up to support the show. All right. So with that said, I think we should just dive right into it. Unless there's an issue with like the sound or anything like that, which it doesn't seem to be any sort of issues there when it comes to sound, video, etc. I don't think I'm out of focus. I've got the autofocus on, so I don't see any issues there. But I am in HD, which is disastrous. So anyway, HD, I'm a mess. It's sad. Okay, but let's move on. Let's dive into the show. Okay. Fun stuff. So President Donald Trump continues to sweat about impeachment and is now claiming that he will take any attempt at impeachment to the Supreme Court. Now, anybody who knows the law, and you guys might not be aware, that makes no sense. He can't actually take it to the Supreme Court. Courts don't handle impeachment proceedings. You know who handles it? Congress. The House brings in articles of impeachment, and the Senate basically votes to convict. And that's how it works. That's how it's laid out in the Constitution. Nonetheless, Trump earlier today tweeted this. The Mueller report, despite being written by angry Democrats and Trump haters, that's strange, and with unlimited money behind it, $35 million, didn't lay a glove on me. Now, again, this is the same person who, when this came out, had Bill Barr basically come out and write a very nice summary of it, where he then is like, oh, full exoneration. But he can't help himself, even though, yes, it didn't necessarily go after him, because Mueller basically said, I can't really indict him. We've got a Justice Department that's not willing to indict, so we're just going to punt this over to Congress. So now he's, of course, raging about it on Twitter. He continues, he said, I did nothing wrong. If the partisan Dems ever tried to impeach, I would first head to the Supreme Court. But wait. Okay, so let's break that down, right? First off, I did nothing wrong. That's false. Look, says the guy who in the report was found to have been, committed obstruction no fewer than 10 times. And I say no fewer because there were plenty of times that he tried to do obstruction that his own aides were like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. That's really, really dumb. That's really stupid. Not really interested in doing that. Now, what also was said in the report is that basically Mueller suggested that Congress hold the president accountable using Congress. Now, that would mean articles of impeachment. That makes sense. The report did not say that it was an exoneration of the president. Obstruction, after all, is still a crime, even if the underlying crime being investigated wasn't. Now, what do I mean by that? That means that even though that they did find insufficient evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving Russia, or so-called Russiagate, in the 2016 elections, if you try to block an investigation, because look, you don't know the investigation is going to find. You could find the investigation could clear you. But if you're super worried and paranoid like President Trump and start attacking the investigation, maybe because, I don't know, maybe because he is hiding something or hates investigations. I don't know. I don't know the reason why. But if you try to block it, undermine it, or not cooperate, guess what? That's a crime. That is still considered a crime. It's obstruction. And last I knew, we lived in the nation of laws, and no president should be above the law. Now, President Trump, of course, believes, oh, no, I am above the law. And I packed a court with my cronies. And so, what? Now, if you try to impeach me, I'm going to go to the court. Now, of course, as usual, we have social media users that are far smarter than the President of the United States, and that is very sad. And they quickly piled on to correct him, starting with conservative lawyer and husband to White House counsel Kellyanne Conway. This is George Conway. And they said, quote, "You're lying again. It is astounding how little understanding you have of the Constitution you're sworn to uphold." The only thing Trump basically swore to uphold, by the way, is himself. Daniel Dresner said, quote, "The Constitution, how does it work? I don't know, maybe it's like magnets. How do they work?" Points for the reference on that one. Devin Nunes' cow says, "Obstruction of justice, abuse of power." So that's a couple of the things that are in there. Then, of course, there's conspiracy, obstruction of justice, as I said, witness tampering, witness intimidation, bank fraud, insurance fraud, emoluments clause violations, etc. Right? And that's just, those are the charges in there. Now, more tweets here. Joyce Aline says, "So much wrong with this president and with the election of a man who is ignorant about the Constitution." Well, that's most Republicans, unfortunately. Most Republican politicians, I should say. "So worrisome he believes the court will save him, no matter what." Now, again, I mentioned that it's probably because he thinks, well, look, I stacked the Supreme Court. I put Gorsuch there. I put Kavanaugh there with the help of Mitch McConnell for, it basically, I blocked Merrick Garland for nearly a year and then managed to get my own guys in there. Well, they'll protect me. And, of course, the reason that he thinks that is, I helped them get in there on the Supreme Court. And now they owe me. And they're going to protect me. Huh. Right. Now, again, he's got a gross misunderstanding of how this entire process works. He thinks, for one, and there's this, I guess there's this pervasive belief that impeachment just means removal. No, it doesn't necessarily mean removal. Bill Clinton got impeached, and he was still president. So, there you go. But he doesn't understand these things. He doesn't know what it means, doesn't understand impeachment, doesn't even understand the Constitution. It's super sad because he's the president of the United States. There's more. Kevin Cruz says, wait, you think the Supreme Court is going to stop a Senate impeachment trial? Did you replace Rudy Giuliani with Louise Mensch? Now, Louise Mensch, the reason I've never talked about her before is that she's basically a crazy person who sees Russians everywhere. And I mean everywhere. I'm not kidding. Check out her Twitter feed. It is a ball of crazy. That said, let's move on. Kenneth Heinz decides to give a couple of facts about the process. Says, the Chief Justice will preside over your Senate trial. That's John Roberts. But other than that, the Supreme Court has no power whatsoever to review or impede your impeachment and, hopefully, removal. Okay? So, again, facts. The Glare says, I will go to the judicial branch to stop the legislative branch from performing its constitutional oversight over the executive branch. That's basically what they're doing right now. And it sounds about right. I love this name. Matt Ratio Howard Schultz on every tweet. Negrin says, it's a little weird but not surprising that not a single reporter has ever asked Trump to explain any part of the Constitution. That is a great point. And makes you wonder why. Oh, right, because it would show how embarrassingly ignorant the President of the United States is. Trump understands almost nothing. Again, I think the only amendments that he's aware of is the second and maybe some of the first. He's not smart. He doesn't read. He has no intellectual curiosity and is an all-around dotard. Just not a smart person. Not a very stable genius. Moving on. Renato Mariotti says, the Mueller report paints a picture of Trump constantly told by aides, lawyers, and other officials that much of what he did was wrong. And this tweet makes clear he has learned nothing. Honestly, did anybody expect him to learn anything from this debacle? Look, the reason that I say that, is because this is somebody who's never had to learn anything from getting punished, right? From ever having to admit that he did anything wrong in the first place. He's never taken responsibility for his actions. Ergo, he's never learned anything from those actions. He's gotten away with everything in his entire life. And it's because he's supposedly wealthy and powerful, although we don't know how wealthy he is. He won't learn anything until he's actually been held accountable for his actions. I have one final tweet here. And it's Rick Wilson, somebody I don't necessarily agree with, but fun tweet anyway. He said, didn't lay a glove on you. Dude, you're sweating like a Roy Moore at a middle school gym class. The reason that I read that is because of the fantastic Roy Moore joke. You can't beat that. Well done. Okay. Dotard, sorry. I know people are correcting me. All right, moving on. Let's go to Twitter. Okay, there we go. On Tuesday, President Trump hosted Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey in the Oval Office for a special closed-door meeting. Now, the circumstances of the meeting, kind of interesting. We'll get into that. But first, the meeting was basically supposed to be about what Jack Dorsey could do to maybe help the platform or, use it to spread more awareness of things like efforts to fight the opioid addiction, for example. Stuff like that. However, according to a source familiar with the conversation, Donald Trump had a different conversation in mind. According to that source, quote, a large percentage of the meeting, which included senior White House officials such as Trump's social media director Dan Scavino, was spent addressing the subject of Trump's followers. Wait. So now, he gets Jack Dorsey into a meeting and then complains about not having enough followers. Seriously. The president stated his belief that he had lost some of his 59 million followers in anti-Trump, anti-conservative Twitter purges. Oh, here we go again. This is something that's pervasive on the right. Oh, the liberals, the Jack Dorsey's he's censoring my Twitter. I can point out a lot of really good left-leaning accounts that go after people who are wealthy and powerful that have been deleted. I know one of them was Bourgeois Alien, I believe. And she got banned from Twitter. And so, hashtag Free Beth, right? Anybody who's followed that account, you guys know. She's had some amazing tweets and actually got basically suspended off Twitter for going after somebody who was trophy hunting and calling them like a terrible person. So, no, and there's a lot of left-leaning accounts that have been suspended on Twitter. So, no, they're not going after the right wing, okay? At least not exclusively. But seeing Republicans, right-wingers are like, oh, no, how dare you? You're only coming after conservatives because you're liberal. Come on, man. Come on. All right. Now, again, here we have the President of the United States crying and whining like a baby, sad, playing the victims. And, of course, it's because he doesn't know how to do anything else except for whine and cry. Oh, my Twitter account. I should have millions more followers. He's got 59 million followers for now. For Christ's sakes, man. So now what's Dorsey going to do? I love this. He apparently had to explain very gently to the president that, like other Twitter users, his account periodically loses followers when the site deletes fake or bot accounts. So, okay. Now, Twitter has a bot problem, and Twitter has a fake account problem as well. Now, I love the parody accounts, and those, unfortunately, have been getting shut down and caught up in these purges, too. Which, again, is unfortunate because, again, I love those parody accounts, and they're pretty funny. So now, let's see. Hold on for a second. There are a lot of bots, and they have been trying to get rid of a lot of these bots, right? So now, on the subject of Donald Trump's Twitter account, well, now, apparently, his Twitter account was full of bots. Back in 2018, there was a company called SparkToro that ran an analysis on Trump's followers and found that over half of them, 33 million accounts, were labeled suspicious. Now, why is that? Well, let me give you the details here. And it basically what they did is they ran Trump's followers through a machine learning-based tool that would pick up signals that an account might be spam, propaganda, a bot, or inactive. If the account racks up about 7 to 10 signals or more, it was counted as fake. Now, let me give you the criteria, right? Some of the signals that they picked up from a lot of Trump's followers. Inactivity, right? Apparently, 72% of them had been inactive for over 120 days. Another thing that might or might not be a signal, 36% used Twitter's default profile image. 39% used display names that include spam words and patterns. 92% either don't use an URL in their profile or employ a URL with spam patterns. And that one I'm not so sure because not everybody puts a website in their bio. 60% don't use a recognized location. I can understand that, like, people might not want to put their location because of their privacy concerns. So that's fine. 27% have set their language to something other than English. Again, I don't think that's on its own something that's too strange, right? Because people who are foreign accounts can use other languages. So I don't think that's a gigantic red flag there. Nonetheless, there's more. 54% have gone more than a year without sending more than a handful of tweets. 3% send an abnormally large number of tweets per day. So that could mean that's maybe automated. 96% had been placed on very few or zero lists. Now, that one's not surprising to me because I see a lot of people saying no lists. I don't want to end up on somebody's list. I'm not interested. 79% have an unusually small number of followers. Mainly if you're not active, you don't get a lot of followers. And really, what's their criteria on that? 76% follow an unusual number of accounts. and 74% employ spam correlated keywords in their profile description. So now look, each one of these alone, not a big deal. But if there are a really high number of them, of these things, correlated to one account, then that looks suspicious, and it could mean that they're possibly bot, spam, or propaganda. Okay, so maybe, yeah. So now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bots, but Twitter has been attempting to read out and root out botting accounts. And during this private gathering in the West Wing, Dorsey assured Trump that, hey, man, that's all we're trying to do. We want you and everyone else on Twitter to have as many real people followers as they can. Now, in that case, if Dorsey's successful, I'm sure a lot of people would lose a lot of followers, especially people who are famous, because there are scams out there, which basically allow you to buy Twitter followers, which I think is insane. I don't imagine why anybody would want to do that. I guess it's like, oh no, look at me, I'm an influencer. I've got so much influence. Look at my Twitter account. You know who sounds like somebody that they would be willing to buy bots? Donald Trump. Just saying. Now, of course, is Trump buying it? Not at all. Why? Well, because Obama. Yes, it's Obama's fault. Two people close to Trump previously told the Daily Beast that Trump has repeatedly griped to associates about how his predecessor, President Obama, has more Twitter followers than he has, even though by Trump's own assessment, he's better at Twitter than Obama is. Oh, that's funny. Oh, what a sad baby. Obama had more followers than me. Obama. The liberal Twitter must be plotting against me. I hate this. I'm the victim here. I'm a victim. Always with the whining and the crying from conservatives. And Donald Trump is chief baby. And you know what's funny? The tweets that brought this meeting together was him complaining on Twitter about Twitter. Get a load of these tweets. He said the best thing to ever happen to Twitter is Donald Trump. And he's quoting Maria Bartiromo there. So true, but they don't treat me well as a Republican. Very discriminatory. Hard for people to sign on. What? Constantly taking people off lists. Big complaints from many people. Different names, over 100 million. But should be higher than that, or much higher than that, if Twitter wasn't playing their political games. No wonder Congress wants to get involved, and they should. Must be more and fairer. Companies, get out the word. Wow. Hey, there's nothing like being a free market Republican. That's also trying to force companies to allow you to keep bot followers so you can have more than the black guy that you are jealous of. This is the President of the United States, folks. What a complete and utter joke. He's so insecure. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back. Read a couple of comments, and then we'll get into the Lindsey Graham story. Stay right here. We'll be back in a minute. Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. So apparently the camera is pretty good. People counting my pores. I'm not sure how good that is. I might have to do something about that. Again, I'm only doing something to try to reduce like the glare on my forehead. I think I'm somewhat successful. So, great. On that, or I should say on something different other than the way that I look. Let's go to some comments. The Searoth says, how the hell was that man elected? That made no sense, referring to Donald Trump. Okay. You know what's funny? You guys know I'm a skeptic of Russiagate, right? Very, very skeptical of the whole Russiagate narrative, right? But you know what? Part of me thinks, not that I agree with, right? But thinks, I can understand why you would think that he would have to cheat to win an election. Because you don't want to think that there is a significant subsection of the country who is that stupid to vote for someone like Donald Trump. Like, no. You had to have cheated. There's no way that enough people voted for Donald Trump legitimately. Like, who could vote for that guy? But they walk among us. They walk among us, and they vote, and they believe in some insane things. Really. Now, if you want to talk about actual cheating, now look, when it comes to voter suppression, right? That's a big way of actually cheating, and Republicans are more than happy and willing to do that. And so, let's not discount that voter suppression. I forget his name, but there's a guy that talks about this all the time. He is Greg something. I don't know. I forget the name right now, but he's an investigative reporter. He's done a lot of work in looking at voter suppression that happened during the 2016 election. And I think that was a very, very significant factor. But anyway, now, more comments here. Elwell, another member, says, Republican worldview is so narrow, they might as well be blind. I don't disagree with that. And a non-member comment here, Prene says, every time YouTube clears sock accounts, Dave Rubin loses half of his subs and cries about it. Dave Rubin, man, that guy's the worst. The worst. Okay, I'm not going to do that anymore, but that's my John Ralphio impression. I've been watching a lot of Parks and Rec lately, so I'm just not going to do that again, because that is literally the worst. Greg Pallas, thank you guys. I could not remember his name for the life of me, but he's done a lot of great work. Rube David. Okay, Pranay. See, I'm paying attention to the chat, you guys, because you guys are super smart, so best audience in the world. All right, moving on. One more. Oh, I think that's actually all the member comments and stuff that I have. Let's move on. More stories. Let's get into it. Okay. Boom. Senator Lindsey Graham has become a very sad and pathetic man. Yes, he was very sad and pathetic before, but now even worse, as he is basically a Trump toady. Now, I say that because he has been defending Donald Trump when it comes to the Mueller investigation. In fact, he tweeted this: using the Mueller report as a basis for impeachment would be an unhinged act of political retribution. To me, the Mueller report is vindication of President Trump. No collusion, which, by the way, collusion was not mentioned, although in the report it said that it did not find sufficient evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving Russia. No underlying crime. But see, you don't have to have an underlying crime in order to obstruct justice. And Donald Trump had absolutely obstructed justice at least 10 documented times and had attempted far more times. And then he mentioned in the same tweet, no obstruction. That's not true at all. And the president and administration overwhelmingly cooperated with the Mueller investigation. Apparently, according to reports, they did not basically cooperate with the Mueller investigation. Anyway, now, he continued or ended the tweet by saying, time to move on. No, it's not time to move on. Again, 10 counts of obstruction, no evidence of criminal conspiracy, as I mentioned before. Nonetheless, he is a criminal, and there are other investigations out on him. I think, look, Bill Clinton got impeached for less. So I think we should hold this president absolutely accountable. Now, that said, social media decided to weigh in, and I love it. Kevin Ernest says, literally none of this is true. Andrea says, wow, what a stretch. Just remarkable to imagine that you gave those impeachment speeches about Bill Clinton. You should watch them again. Actually, you know what? Let's compare 1994 Lindsey Graham to 2019 Lindsey Graham, and we'll see the difference.
This is about a person out of control who took the law, turned it upside down. Every time there was a crossroads, he put his personal and legal interest ahead of the nation. He's the chief law enforcement officer of the land. He encouraged people to lie for him. He lied. I think he obstructed justice. I think there's a compelling case that he has, in fact, engaged in conduct that would be better for him to leave office than to stay in office.
Now, look, that is not him talking about Donald Trump. That is him talking about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, whom they investigated for Whitewater, which, by the way, wasn't at all connected with what they originally tried to do. Or actually, no, Whitewater, they had originally tried to do this and then ended up going after him and impeaching him for having an inappropriate relationship with an intern. So that was Bill Clinton's business stuff, by the way. And they looked into it. And, of course, now Republicans, in protecting Donald Trump, are complete 100% hypocrites. Absolute hypocrites. So that Lindsey Graham back in the past, standing for, Republicans against a Democratic president, and now, again, standing for Donald Trump against impeachment. Now, more tweets here. Mass for Shut-ins says, do you ever look in the mirror and try to remember what it was like to even have a sliver of dignity? No, I don't think he ever had any. Never. Boss says, I'm old enough to remember when Lindsey Graham was for impeachment when presidential infractions were microscopic compared to what we see today. Having principles is pretty difficult, though, and it's much easier to become, as George F. Will called him, a political windsock. I don't even think it's that so much. I think it's since the death of John McCain, which, by the way, Lindsey Graham should be absolutely irate at Donald Trump and how he treated his buddy John McCain. Even after his death, he comes out and starts talking crap about him. Now, again, I think I'm not a fan of John McCain. Just FYI on that, right? And I have huge criticisms of him. I think he is a warmonger, etc., right? That said, if you are Lindsey Graham, John McCain's literal best friend for years, right? How are you going to suddenly suck up to this guy who said some of the most horrible things even after the death of McCain? I mean, he's got no core. Lindsey Graham has no core whatsoever. Avalanche Doused in Flames says, quote, 1, you didn't read the report, or 2, you're lying through your teeth. Either way, it's sad what a gutless sycophant for the criminal in the White House you will become. It's true. Kevin Cruz, who seems to make it a lot of these, says, to me, Avengers Endgame is a romantic comedy set in Victorian England. It's fun to imagine stuff, isn't it? And maybe Lindsey Graham someday can imagine himself as a strong conservative. Schooley says, to me, chocolate is fruit. Fruity chocolate. Patrick Bowman says that's impressively far from what it actually said, and that's true, but I'm guessing he's going off the Barr memo. Liberated Republican says, I'm going to make it my personal business to make sure you aren't reelected. Awesome. Let's see. Jaro Cake Lady says, You're full of baloney. Mueller laid it out for Congress to take next steps, which would be impeachment. There's loads of evidence of both collusion and obstruction. You've completely lost sight of what your job is. I know that there's definitely obstruction of justice. And so that should be enough to start impeachment proceedings. Robert Broder says, no obstruction? You mean because of all his failed attempts? It must be noted that, yeah, again, he did fail because A, he's too dumb, and B, his aides were not dumb enough to do the things that were obviously illegal that he had asked them to do. And so, to me, of course, it takes a special type of stupid to want to do crime on behalf of Donald Trump. Why is that? It's because they'll throw you under the bus every single time. Nonetheless, Lindsey Graham is clamoring to be on the underside of a future bus. And it's because, I don't know, maybe he thinks that Trump is a new daddy figure. I don't know what the problem is with Lindsey Graham. All I know is it's both sad, pathetic, and in the end, we'll get him absolutely nothing. Okay. Moving on. Let's go to Buttigieg. We got Pete Buttigieg here. All right. So presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg is trying to make himself stand out. Right now, he's in a little bit of a contest with Robert Francis O'Rourke and trying to get media attention, and he has been actually very successful because he has been swiping at Democratic frontrunner Bernie Sanders. Now, recently, he went after him when it comes to the topic of electability in the general election. Now, we've heard this before. He said, quote, in a interview with the New York Times, I have a hard time seeing the coalition ultimately coming together there. So Bernie Sanders will have a very difficult time winning the election because he can't reach out to other people. Now, read between the lines, and of course, you'll recognize that as an attack from so-called, the centrists or the corporate establishment, whose line is always on Bernie. He only appeals to the white bros, the Bernie bros. He can't build a coalition of, people of color, minorities that make up a large percentage of the Democratic electorate. All he's got is the angry white men. And so he'll have electability issues. Now, wait a minute here. That's completely wrong. We know that. First of all, Bernie Sanders, again, a lot of his his support comes from a diverse set of people, right? He's actually the most popular politician in the country still, and has fairly high favorability ratings among all demographics except for white males. So it's literally the opposite. Okay. Now, among older, wealthier liberals and older minorities, Bernie Sanders does struggle. And of course, Gen Z, younger people, and independents, I think for the most part, have yet to make up their mind on this one this time because there is such a crowded field. But I think Bernie Sanders, and this is based on evidence that I've seen, would actually do incredibly well against Donald Trump. He has a very loyal base of support, can raise a lot of money from small donors. He's actually leading the field. He's got more money than the DNC and DCCC and another Democratic organization. He's got more money than them combined. And his average donation is about $14. And that is from hundreds of thousands of small donors. And yet he still leads the field in fundraising because he has such a wide base of support. And not only that, but he's able to unite Democrats with incredibly popular policy, things that are now mainstream, Medicare for all, free college, living wage, etc. Unfortunately, I think who Pete Buttigieg is really trying to appeal to are the Pumas, right? The angry leftover Clinton voters. They make up a very small minority of Democratic voters that are very vocal when it comes to Twitter and Facebook, right? Now, thankfully, I don't think that there's enough of them to really derail Bernie Sanders if he makes it the general. Although there's a recent poll, and I don't know how scientific it was, but something like 20% of Democratic primary voters or something like that will not support Sanders in the general, or is it 20% of Democrats that won't support Bernie Sanders in the general? Some crazy number like that. I don't necessarily believe it. I think they oversample people who are older and who are less progressive when it comes to those polls. But then again, it could be something like that because I think it was 25% of Clinton voters voted for McCain back in 2008, where you had just 12% of Sanders voters that voted for Trump instead of Clinton in the 2016 election. So there will be, I think, a significant number of people that would vote against Bernie Sanders, and that, of course, is your Pumas, right? That stands for Party Unity, my ass. So it's just going to be like the Obama-McCain voters. And, of course, I don't think they'll be able to derail Sanders because he has very, very wide appeal. But they sure are going to try. That's for sure. Now, Buttigieg also said that in 2016, voters wanted to, quote, blow up the system, saying that this mentality could lead to somebody like Bernie and it could lead you to somebody like Trump. That's how we got where we are. And so let me set that straight. Bernie Sanders voters don't want to blow up the system. We want to fix the system. We want to make the system work for everybody. Now, Bernie Sanders is a capitalist. And, of course, that angers actual socialists and communists. I know. I've seen it, right? But, look, Sanders has always been in favor of a capitalist country, but with a very, very generous welfare system like some of the Scandinavian countries. You have Denmark and Finland, etc. And, look, the funny thing about that is those two countries are usually listed among the top happiest countries in the world by the OECD. So Bernie Sanders wants to see our system become more like that. And that is an incredibly popular position because he's in favor of incredibly popular policies and he's been championing them for a long time. How he would not be able to build a consensus when Medicare for All polls 70% among all Americans, including somewhere around 50% of Republicans are open to the idea, maybe slightly less than that. That's crossover appeal. He does actually very well with independents as well. So, look, I don't see how that could not be a winning message, especially when we had other polls, internal polling from the Sanders camp, that pointed out that he could win, and basically he's winning by double digits against Donald Trump in a hypothetical matchup by double digits. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But there it is. Nonetheless, he's going to continue with these ridiculous narratives. Buttigieg also said that at the time, quote, people were refreshed by the novelty of that boldness of Sanders' ideas, but now they're less exciting. Oh, so you think that we support Bernie Sanders because of the novelty? The novelty of the idea. Now, old hat, Medicare for all, everybody believes in that, except for me. Free college, everybody believes in that. Oh, except for me, because I'm Pete Buttigieg, and I don't stand for anything. Now, look, here's the thing. Does he have a little bit of a point? Slightly, and let me actually get into that for a second. So I've seen some examples where some influencers, and I'm not saying that this is a majority of Sanders voters, but there are people that are now like, okay, sure, now that everybody has at least, when it comes to verbally and coming out, I guess, in favor of these policies, although we don't trust that they'll actually follow through, at least they've taken up and jumped on the bandwagon of supporting Medicare for all, free college, and a living wage, right? So now it is mainstream. Medicare for all is mainstream. Now that's a win. That's a win for Bernie Sanders. But Buttigieg and a lot of these centrists are saying, it's not a win. I mean, for Sanders anyway. I mean, now that everybody else believes in Medicare for all, why do we need Bernie Sanders? I mean, that was that infamous article that had came out probably a month or so ago. But see, here's the thing. I don't think that hurts Bernie Sanders as much as people believe. Because he still has positions, by the way, that also are fairly radical. Because Bernie Sanders is a radical. He's a change maker, right? And for right now, and this is considered a radical position, but it's actually not. He's getting attacked for wanting felons to be able to vote while in prison, to be re-enfranchised. Now, to us, that seems, oh, wow, that's bold, right? Even I was like, wait a minute. But hold on. When you think about it, it's actually a pretty good policy of letting people in prison have their votes. It's consistent when it comes to people having the rights that all Americans should have. And look, another thing is that it really plays into racial justice. I mean, think about it. A lot of people in prison are African Americans, right? And a lot of prisoners, African Americans especially, are there for nonviolent drug offenses. Why are you going to take the right to vote away from them? Actually, when you think about it, when you look at it, it's kind of a way to do voter suppression. I get that prisoners will lose some of their rights. For example, the whole purpose of prison is, well, not purpose, but the whole result of prison is people losing their liberty, right? And part of that, losing that liberty, is losing the freedom to be able to go and do things. Obviously, you can't do things when you're in prison. And you also lose your ability to own a weapon, right? But that said, if you're in prison, should you lose every single right? Did you forfeit every single right? I don't believe that. And not only that, but of course, the whole purpose of prison is supposed to be rehabilitation. Now, I understand that part of it is also to keep some dangerous people off the streets, but you can't be in favor of some people in prison getting a right and others not getting their rights. No, rights are rights, which means everybody gets it. And so you can't really pick and choose who gets that right. And again, what if they did have, do a violent crime earlier in their life? They got sentenced, but in their prison stay, they had become rehabilitated. What about that? And so if you still deny them the right because of their initial crime, it gets to be a slippery slope. And after all, I ended up thinking about all that stuff and agreeing with Bernie Sanders. Buttigieg does not agree with Bernie Sanders. And the discussion right now is framed, and it's so disingenuously by The Hill, for example, and other outlets, that the Boston Bomber is getting the right to vote. Bernie Sanders believes that the Boston Bomber should be able to get the right to vote. And that's thanks to the answer that question in the CNN town hall. So it's a disingenuous framing here, and one that is, of course, crafted to be weaponized against Bernie Sanders, who basically is arguing that, no, we should be consistent. Every prisoner should get the right to cast an absentee ballot. Just because they're in prison doesn't mean they lose every single one of their rights. And at the end of the day, he's right, he's consistent. Again, if it means that, yes, if one person that is terrible gets the right to vote, but also means that thousands of nonviolent offenders also get their vote, then I'm sorry, I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to be okay with that one terrible person getting the right to vote. And it's not as if they're going to vote, for something that's going to release all of them from prison. And I know that's a fear, right? And of course, that gets to the racial justice component here that is sadly missing in this conversation. But that's an example of a bold idea that is getting attacked by the establishment, but is now firing up some progressive voters, just like free college and Medicare for all did in 2016. So think about it, Bernie still got a few so-called radical ideas left. And so I think that whole argument that Buttigieg is using, oh, he's lost his luster, he's not sad, there are people way to the left of him now, not true at all. The only person that's really putting up a challenge to Bernie Sanders, at least when it comes to progressive policy, is Elizabeth Warren, who's been killing it. She's been killing it. But anyway, there's also something that helps Bernie Sanders here, and that is the trust, right? Bernie Sanders has been consistently for these positions for decades, and that is very important when it comes to voters. So I'm going to say that I think it's not Bernie Sanders that's going to have a hard time. I think it's Pete Buttigieg. If he becomes the nominee, he's going to have a very hard time electability. Why is that? He has no policy positions, and he's avoided talking about those policy positions. And he is what we consider a centrist moderate, which, by the way, We already ran a centrist moderate against Donald Trump. She lost. And I think his only appeal is that he is basically an impressive human being. He speaks many different languages. He's got the identity, so he ticks that box off. His husband's actually kind of cool. He can play the piano, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But nothing that's really substantive. Nothing that's going to, policy-wise, it's going to get me to vote for this guy. In reality, I think he's an empty suit with not the best track record for when he was mayor. I mean, you've got that racist controversy involving the police in South Bend, racist policing. You had the policy on housing that created big problems for the minority community in that city. And so because of that, I think he's going to have a harder time in the general than Bernie Sanders. But you know what? It's good that we're talking about this issue, that we're vetting these candidates in a primary so that we can pick the candidate who is not only the best on policy, but the strongest to take on Donald Trump, and who can lead the Democratic Party in actually transforming this country and giving us the change that we need so that this country actually represents the people instead of just the wealthy and special interests. So I think I'm fairly clear on that. All right. I think that's too long of a story here. So I think if I do this story, I'm going to be here for like the next 15 minutes. And so I think I'll wait for that till tomorrow. All right. Anyway, thank you guys for going around the nation with me today. Appreciate you guys. Sorry we didn't have enough time to go and do that final story. But I do want to read and respond to some comments while I'm still here. Let's see. The Searoth says, all that does is trigger the racists to vote for Trump because they want Trump over Bernie. Okay, yeah, there is a big component here of, why certain people voted for Trump over anyone else. And I think sexism and racism played a big part of the Trump diehards. But, of course, you can't also forget the rock throwers. And those are the people who did want to change the establishment. They wanted to shake it to its core so that we could bring in radical change. And we got no radical change, actually. What we instead got was radical corruption. So, there you go. There's that. All right. Let's see. Also, from the Searoth, this is exactly why we don't want felons from voting, to suppress the black vote. That's what it's about. Now, black people, I didn't mention in the story, but they ended up getting counted in the census, right? And they're not getting their representation because they're not able to vote for that representation. Now, before I looked into it, I was like, well, if you serve your time, then you should be able to vote, and when you're in prison, you shouldn't be able to. But actually, when you look into it and look at the effects and really do the research, it's like, well, no, actually, maybe felons should get the right to vote. And that actually is a good policy. So, yeah, we should move towards that position. And also, not only move towards that position, but, of course, move towards eliminating for-profit prisons and making it so that there are less people in prison. So, LL said, Pete Buttigieg needs to go back to disenfranchising POC, covering up police discrimination and gentrifying black neighborhoods. Damn, that's harsh but true. More here. Let's see. I hope to see a Sanders-Warren ticket. I think that'd be an excellent ticket. Polling, of course, is, yes, sample sizes are too small. I agree with that. Cory Booker is expected to drop out soon. That's interesting. I will look into that. And, okay. A lot of great comments for you guys. Am I playing Star Wars Battlefield 2? You mean Battlefront? Yes, Battlefront. I play it every once in a while, but I don't actually, haven't actually went on Twitch to record it or anything like that. But I've been doing that, and I've also got back into SWTOR. So, at least I'm trying to get back into SWTOR. And finishing up some of the class stories, or actually doing the class stories. So, But that, yeah, it is fun. Try Capital Assault. You'll have a fun time. No, the only thing that sucks though, the camera is out of. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but I'm gonna keep working that. Top AG pick. Let's see. I don't remember what server. So, but anyway, I'm gonna head out here. So we'll get out of here for the day. Thank you guys for tuning in. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. Thanks, everybody. Oh, and either TYT is next, or if you're interested, Jimmy Dore, apparently. Okay, so we'll see you guys tomorrow.